joined in Johannesburg is Maurice Madiba. We're going to talk now about the overall African story. Where are we heading? Where is Nigeria heading? Where is Egypt heading? Where is South Africa heading? Those are the three biggest economies, of course, on the continent. And South Africa facing junk status, according to pundits and according to the prognostications of a couple of the rating agencies. And Nigeria also on the brink as the oil price remains, okay, it's better than it was, but it's still under pressure. Maurice Madiba is the founding director of Cloud Atlas Investing. Africa's fall is a little bit strong, I think, but we're under pressure, as many other jurisdictions are, Maurice.
Yeah, that's correct. A lot of people would expect Africa to be doing quite good numbers, but if you look around the world, there's not a lot of positive growth stories. But Africa still has a glimmering light in that the markets are offering quite good returns. There are some concerns around the debt of some of Africa's biggest markets. So around Nigeria, its ability to issue government bonds, and also it's being removed from some big world indices. The first one being the JP Morgan one, and then now there's talk of them being removed from the MSCI index. It is important to note that that doesn't affect a country's ability to be able to raise funds. It doesn't affect a country's growth. What it does is it affects the asset allocation coming in from international investors.
Yeah, the Nigeria story is an interesting one because, I mean, in my simplistic way, I look at the oil price and I think if the oil price is up, then the Nigerian economy is going to do well and the Nigerian stock indices are going to do well as well. But on the other hand, there's other things going on in Nigeria. I mean, if you look at Pick and Pay, for example, there's a lot of carcasses of South African companies that have tried in Nigeria and failed. But you look at Pick and Pay, they're going into Nigeria as well. So it's the consumer story, not just an oil story.
That's correct. So a lot of people tend to overlook the positive stories because there's a lot of negative news that comes out there. But you know, with the sites of Pick and Pay going into Nigeria is a positive move, given that just a few months ago Clover had pulled out on its plans of going into Nigeria. And now you've got quite a big South African retailer looking to go into there. So there is a lot of appetite for Africa. People are still buying the African growth story because it is still going to deliver. One thing that you would see out of an economy like Nigeria is its ability to weather the storm, which is the low oil price. And for other African economies, it's the same thing. To be able to weather this storm of low commodity prices, and if they manage to get through this, they can start posting some positive returns, which is what investors expect out of Africa.
End of January, we were $27 a barrel, the oil price, Maurice, and now I'm looking at my screen, it's $48.25 per barrel for Brent crude in London. That is a massive, massive move, and I don't think that has been reflected in the figures that will be coming out of Nigeria in the next 3 to 6 months.
That's correct. So I guess I picked a good day to be on the show. It is good to see this rebound. Also, gold price is doing pretty well, and commodities are starting to pick up quite a bit. And this means that markets like Nigeria will be able to, when they do debt, raise some debt in the international capital markets, they can start to raise less debt because they'll be able to fund some of their budget deficits now with an increased and improved oil price.
Let's move south now and come to South Africa because the talk is, of course, of junk status. And my question to you is the market already discounting that? The Rand certainly seems to be shrugging it off at 14.17 as we speak against the US dollar. What about the bond market, though? If we do become junk, do we get kicked out of the World Government Bond Index, and what are the implications?
Yeah, so the junk status has been talk of the town for a while now. I don't see South Africa getting removed from it, but you must remember that it's based on index rules. And the World Government Bond Index does say if it's a non-investment grade bond, it's going to come out of the index. So what we'd see in that scenario is that South Africa would attract less flows from passive funds in the international capital markets, but it won't affect South Africa's ability to raise debt. South Africa will still be able to raise quite a significant amount of debt to fund projects and budget deficits if they need to, without being impacted by being on the index or not. But we still have to be very smart in terms of South African consumers that it's going to be a bit of a tough period for us now until the country starts to grow at quite attractive rates, because there is a negative outlook on South Africa at this stage. So we just have to buckle down, manage debt a little bit better, and then the policy and the fiscal policy and monetary policy will also do their job to protect the South African economy. So we're in a pretty good position now, although there is a lot of talk that maybe we would go down to junk, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, and if it does happen, as I said, the market's probably factored that in. And in fact, if you have a look at what happened to South Korea when they were downgraded to junk status, the market actually went on a bit of a tear after that because, as I said, it's a sort of a sell the rumour, buy the fact situation. We can't. The more things change, Maurice, the more they stay the same. South Africa and the rest of Africa is a continent that is commodity rich, and with commodity prices going up, we're doing okay. Just look at the South African rand, for example, which to me is inextricably linked to the fortunes of key commodities. So this is a good time. Oil up, gold, platinum, etc. And despite the fact we're diversified, we still love our African commodity story.
That's true, and that's not going to change. But as governments start to realize that they have to become dependent on non-commodity based exports, you'll start to see those numbers improve over the years. But that's very long into the future. We are still focused and seen as quite a commodity-driven economy, Africa as a whole and South Africa in particular, despite the fact that it might not actually be the case.
We talk a lot. We've spoken now about Nigeria and South Africa, but there's a country, a very big country, a very influential country north of here called Egypt, and I was staggered to know that only 14% of the Egyptian population is banked. I mean, the opportunities there are, to me, enormous, and they've been clouded over somewhat by political turmoil and unrest and all sorts of other things. But never mind Nigeria and South Africa, Egypt, to me, might be the one that really astounds us over the next decade.
That's correct. If you noticed sometime last year, the Egyptian government issued some bonds to fund projects. And those bonds were largely subscribed to by the retail markets in Egypt, not necessarily your traditional international markets. And it just is testament to show that a lot of people in Egypt do have money, but where do they put their money? When the markets were collapsing in the time of the Arab Spring, people would have rather kept money under their mattress than putting it in a bank. So, you know, you will see a lot of recovery coming out of Egypt in the next couple of years, and a huge boost in terms of real estate development and infrastructure development.
What are you saying at Cloud Atlas Investing to your clients and your prospective clients about the African continent? The honeymoon is not over, but there's been a couple of arguments between the husband and wife, but it looks set fair to me. I must admit, I've in the past been an Afro-pessimist. I'm suddenly starting to become optimistic again.
And that's a good thing, because I think a lot of light is now being shed on Africa in the correct way, which is one of the things that our business does. When you see some negative stories, you tend to paint the whole continent with one stroke, which is not necessarily the case. You have to look at which areas are going to be growing. So I think for the past couple of years, you've seen a lot of banks do well, but now you're starting to see sectors like real estate, food and beverage putting out some good numbers. And the African consumer story becomes quite a good and attractive story to buy into for the future, because you are going to have some rising incomes, you are going to have an increasing population, you are going to face increasing urbanization, which is why a lot of the governments are looking to raise capital to fund these infrastructure projects when the interest rate environment around the world is still as low as it is.
Maurice, we'll leave it there, but thanks very much for your excellent analysis this lunchtime. That's Maurice Madiba, Founding Director of Cloud Atlas Investing.